Are you excited? Yeah, thanks. Thanks for giving up so early. Today is the first day of the conference, so I am first a little quick introduction. I'm excited. I'm the founder of Rails Taiwan, also the organizer of Rails Pacific. So our opening will be more formal today because today the reason we set up panel and the workshop before the section is we thought this should be more interactive event during the conference. When I used to go to other countries' conference, I usually find out the people are not just like not settled for speakers what they prepare. They want to hear more real life experience from the speakers. So that's why we have the panel discussion on this morning. And the following will be the workshop. Hopefully everyone can get something from the workshop. So, okay, today's our panel discussions topic will be, the first one will be refactoring, and the second one will be how to become a senior developer. I encourage everyone can to ask more about more questions because they are very seasoned developer and they are so how do I say yeah. They are all superstars. Anyway, I will hand to the host, the Mark. They will do the panels for everyone. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. Welcome to the first panel. Today's panel will be about refactoring. And my name is Mark. I will be the host. And today we are very happy to have Mr. Shibata Hiroshi-san and, Mr. Akira Matsuda-san. And we have Mr. Ryan Big and Mr. Nick Sutter. Yeah. So can you, in like 1 or 2 sentences, briefly introduce yourself? We start with Akira-san.
All right. So, good morning, everyone. I'm from Japan. I'm Akira. Probably I'm not on the program yet. Well, so I'm a Ruby on Rails committer and a Ruby committer. Also, I guess known as a author of Ruby gem called Kaminari for pagination. Kaminari.
Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah. So I'm gonna do the opening talk tomorrow, I guess, and I'm gonna talk about Action View. So see you there tomorrow again. Thank you.
Thanks. And Hiroshi-san?
Hello, good morning. So my name is Hiroshi Shibata. So I worked at GMO Paperboard. My job title is a chief engineer. So I'm C Ruby committer. So I work to refactoring to Ruby code in Ruby core. So my talk is crafting Rails culture. So our company uses Rails entirely in my company. So our web service is over the 20. So please see you tomorrow. Thank you.
Thanks. And Ryan?
Sure. I work for a company called LifeX. We do some fancy lights you can control with your phone. I'll be giving out some tomorrow, but right now I've got some shirts. I've also written a book called Rails 3 in Action, and I've just finished my other book, Multi-Tenancy with Rails, which I'll be giving a talk on tomorrow. I hope you all come and stay for that because I'm giving the last talk for the conference. So thanks.
Thanks. And Nick?
Hello, everyone. I'm Nick. I'm from Germany. I live in Australia, but not in the same city with this beautiful, handsome guy next to me. I work with Ruby for about 10 years. I've done several gems. I do some Rails contributions from time to time if I feel like it. And I'm basically talking about my gems in my talk tomorrow. So it's a new approach, a new architectural style for Rails. I hope you guys are going to be there and listen. And this is a refactoring panel, so what I want to say up front is I've been doing refactoring the last 5 or 6 years. I haven't worked on any production code, only refactoring. Yes.
Cool. Thanks. We will take the audience questions at the last 10 minutes. So let's get started. And please don't fight and share the mic, So let's start it. First, what keywords flashes in your mind when you think about refactoring?
Well, what comes to mind for me is that if you want to refactor code, it has to be messy in the first place. You can't refactor something that's nice and clean. And the whole test-driven development flow is red-green refactor, or as Shanims and I were talking about in the car on the way over, red, green refactor. So the whole purpose of test-driven development is to refactor at the end of it. So that's what comes to mind.
I thought test-driven development is dead.
It's alive as a zombie.
And Akira-san, do you
What comes to my mind? Something else than TDD?
No, please no TDD debate.
Okay.
I think we all agree that tests and refactoring goes hand in hand, right? I mean, you cannot refactor stuff without knowing whether you break stuff or not. So let's skip that part. And
So maybe, right. So I used to be a Java and .NET programmer before coming to Rails, and refactoring was much more easy.
using the IDEs?
Yeah, because the language supports the static typing, and we had wonderful IDEs like Eclipse or something. So in comparison to that, Ruby is more like refactoring unfriendly language.
But do you think that because what I've seen in Eclipse and stuff, the refactoring logic basically helps you extracting methods and helps you extracting. No, it doesn't really help you extracting classes. So because I think refactoring is more about introducing more classes or changing classes, whereas the IDEs only support like move this method into that class. So I don't know. So there's no for me. There's no there's no difference in Ruby or Java if I refactor. I mean, I agree that typing helps you refactoring because you have a strong interface, and in Ruby your interface is always a bit blurry because you never know if it's an array or is it an active record collection you're passing in and out. So okay, but so I've never found this Eclipse stuff really helpful for refactoring, to be honest.
That's interesting.
May I ask, do any of you use a proper IDE for Ruby development? Or do you
Like
use
Ruby Mine?
Yeah, Ruby Mine. No?
No, I use Sublime.
Sublime for the win. It's Australian, isn't it?
It's Australian for good.
And it's $30 per license. We're not affiliated with the Sublime.
Well, I use Vim.
Then, okay.
I still use Vim.
Do you use the Vim plugins for refactoring?
No.
There's a plugin for Vim for refactoring.
There's a plugin for everything in Vim. So there must be at least 10 plugins for refactoring, I guess. But yeah, that brings me back to the thought of.
I haven't seen one. So the tools I use for refactoring is still like git grep and sed and Vim. It's like sometimes miserable.
Yeah, I find my favorite way of starting a refactoring is Control-Shift-F. That's Sublime command to look through all the files. Because when I look for let's say I change a method, I just use Control-Shift-Find and try to find where this method is used, and that's how I start my refactoring. And then I often use race. So if I don't understand the flow, I put race in the method I want to get rid of or I want to change, and then I just run the code or I run the app to see where
Run the tests.
Well, what if there is no tests?
Write some tests.
Because yeah, we'll talk about the testing and my history. Maybe we'll talk about this a little bit later. But let's assume we had tests. I just run the test, and then I see the stack traces. So and then I get a feeling of how the methods are being used. So my favorite choice is a race. I know it's really primitive, but it works.
It works. Yeah.
I call it race-driven development.
Cool. Shibata-san, do you have any how do you usually refactor? Like, do you just, I guess, do you put refactoring as a low priority, or do you have dedicated time for refactoring?
So I'm a developer productivity team. I am. So I don't write production code usually. So my work is
Me too.
Don't distract.
yeah. So my work is my old work is refactoring. Yeah.
Oh,
So every day. So eliminating code, and create a method and tiny write production code.
Oh.
So you like improving someone else's code every day.
Can I ask you, because I ended up in the same position, can I ask you how you how you became the refactoring expert? Is it because you wanted to be the expert, or is it because someone told you refactor? Or I'm really I'm serious. Like, how did you get into that position? Because I find the position great. Like, I love refactoring. So, and I think you love it as well. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here and talking about it.
Yeah. So do you did someone push the refactoring job to you, or do you volunteer? Oh, you can pass.
how many years have you been working as a refactoring power? Like 1 year, 2 years, 3 years?
2 years.
Okay.
2 years.
Wow. And you're still smiling. Yeah, because I had I don't know how I ended up as a refactoring expert, but people actually started hiring me to work on their legacy code, to change structure, to introduce classes and make it more maintainable and testable, or to introduce testing at all. And I totally don't know how this happened. Like I mean, I'm enjoying my job, but I don't know why I never work on production code, and this is so like it can be really fulfilling working on production code, because you develop something, then you push it out, and users are like, hey, this is awesome. But this never happens to me, because I always refactor, and no one sees my refactoring. That's a bit like, yeah, I don't know how I keep myself happy, but.
I used to work for a company called Reinteractive, and we had a refactoring service we called it Sentinel. And what we'd do is we get these legacy code bases brought to us, and then we'd write up a big document like, this method can be changed into this, and this class should be split into like 3 different classes, and there should be some tests around here and here and here, and here are the pain points. So we'd write up like a 20 to 30 page document and give that to the customer, and then they could hire us again to do that refactoring like as a consultancy, or we could just give them the document and they would go ahead and do the refactoring. So I think that's a productive use of our time. Is teaching people how to refactor. It's like, yeah.
Oh, that's really unique. I have never heard such practice.
Actually, when they got this document and they passed it on to you guys, telling you like, hey, please refactor it, did you actually do what is in the document, or did you just refactor it?
I think that only happened once. And we did what was in the document, and then the client ran out of money, and we could no longer continue.
That you stopped working on page 20, and there were still 20 more pages to go.
Yes.
Sorry, out of money.
Cool. My next question will be, what's the longest piece of refactoring you have done? Like, how many days did it take?
I had this problem with Spree. People wanted to have a customized state engine for Spree, so when you go through the checkout, it's not address, delivery, payment, confirm, complete. It's different steps. That refactoring took me 4 weeks, I think.
And you didn't change any functionality. It's pure just refactoring.
Refactoring and adding a slider, tweaking the functionality a little bit, but mostly just refactoring around the state machine and yeah, that kind of thing. Oh, and I reworked the adjustment system, which took me 2 months, which is more. It's not as much refactoring as it is upgrading. So yeah, for 2 months and 4 weeks.
That's so long.
Just a lot of persistence, a lot of patience, a lot of
tears.
A lot of tears, yes. Yeah, a lot of why isn't this code working? I refactored it. It has to work now.
Right. And Akira-san, how? What's the longest piece?
Longest refactoring that I did. Well, I'm sorry to talking something like you're not asking me again. Well, something that someone else did. The longest refactoring that I've seen was on active record.
Whoa.
So active record is frequently refactored, like totally rewritten by Aaron Patterson and I forgot his name, from England. Anyway,
Josh? No, what's his name?
John Layton.
John Layton, yeah.
So you were part of the team for the refactoring.
Yeah, so yeah.
Oh, and my next question would be
No,
since it's
let me
sorry,
let me go on. So that is actually very bad example of refactoring because because after that big refactorings, the kind of public API breaks. So as a gem author, we sometimes like experience that total breakage of our gems, and so we had to like put if statements, if Rails version bigger than 3, else if Rails version is bigger than 4, or something like that.
So the semantic did change.
Yeah, so what I mean is open source softwares shouldn't be refactored that often.
Oh, so today's first moral is open source software shouldn't be referred to too much.
What's the time frame on that? Is that like it shouldn't be refactored every 3 years, 4 years? How long is it?
That's exactly what happened to ActionView. It hasn't been touched in 7 years.
How long is it going to be until the refactoring is okay? Is it like when you're comfortable, when you're sitting on your big pile of money that you've made on your open source project? Is that okay?
So far as it works.
As it works. Okay. So you could be upgrading and then Rails upgrades and then you have to like upgrade to Rails 3 and then upgrade to Rails 4. Is that the problem? That they made that too quick? 3 to 4?
That's okay. Major app upgrade is okay, I think.
Yeah.
So that's the Ruby way, indeed. Ruby, there are many like bundle libraries in Ruby, but usually the committers don't touch the code until it breaks. I think that's the Ruby way, right?
But so I think I know exactly what you mean when you say don't change it too much. But actually, I do the opposite. In all my gems, I keep changing APIs. I keep changing like aggressively. I call it aggressive refactoring. and I know the problem with like if Rails version this, if Rails version. So I actually wrote a gem to handle that kind of stuff. But it's horrible. I mean, but that's the problem with compatibility. I mean, I love innovation. I love changing my stuff. If I work on my gem and I feel like, hey, this is wrong, I refactor it. And then I just bump the minor version. I don't bump the major version. And this is, of course, wrong. But I don't care. And then, so I do, like, and I know it's wrong, you know, like, and from now on, I will always remember you. This is wrong. But I find it, that's, for me, this is the only way to drive my gem the innovation route, because I don't want to wait for for the next major version bump or something. I just want to, if I feel something is wrong, I change it. And this is why some people hate my stuff, because I really change internals and then just bump the minor version. But I don't know, the active record refactoring. Well, they usually change stuff from one major to the next major version, right? So usually when they change like 3.1 to 3.2, nothing really changes in the.
I don't think so.
Is it?
That's semantic versioning.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I'm not too.
That's how it's supposed to be done.
Well, but it's
Like
it's hard to say what's public and what's a private API in a gem.
Well, anything that's above the private keyword is public.
Well, that's. Thank you, Professor Dr. Big. I wrote a blog post about this. No, the problem is if you write a gem, I'm talking about gems like let's say active record. It's really hard to define this is public, like a find or the where class method, that's public, and then you have like semi-public methods that can be used, but you're not really sure. And then you have private methods, and if you change them, that's all right in a minor version bump. But it's really hard to define what can I change, what do I have to document in gems. Like if you write an application and you change the public API, that's like clearly major version bump. But if you write a gem, it's so hard to, like, I had this problem 100 million times, and then I just usually bump the minor version and people hate me.
Okay. If you don't mind, I want to go back to active record. So it's a team of 3 or 4 people working on refactoring of active record, and it took a long time, I guess. And is it really feasible for multiple people to work on the same refactoring at the same time? Like, does it actually? Do you have to have divided work so you don't touch each other's refactoring? And also to Ryan as well. I guess 4 months is a long time. Is it only you working on the refactoring, or did you work with someone else?
I was working with the community on that, but the community was more like, this is what sucks, and then I had to go and fix it. So I was just holed up in my office in my house fixing this stuff for about 4 months by myself. And then I'd show it to them, and they'd, thank you. The tears have long since dried up.
And then you married.
I'd pitch it to them and they'd say, yeah, that's great, but then there's this corner case that it doesn't support. And you're like, no. Oh, and then you go again and again and again. But after 4 months, we did get there. Back to active record though, I reckon you could work in a team like that, 3 to 4 people, on the same pieces of refactoring. So you could say, hey, I've changed this method, it's got this speed up, but the API's changed slightly. Is this okay? And then somebody else in that team can go, yeah, I think that's a good trade-off. Or no, it's not a good trade-off. And then you can talk about it. Working on a team in refactoring, I think, is much better than working by yourself. In all regards of programming, actually, because when you're working by yourself, you're going to be questioning, is this the right thing to do? Or is this the wrong thing? All the time. And if you're just working by yourself, you can't turn to the developer next to you and say, look at my code, is that okay? So working on a team with active record, it would have driven Aaron insane if he was doing it by himself. It would have driven him literally insane if he did it by himself. He's a little crazy, but he's not going to get locked up anytime soon.
But it's a really, really interesting question, actually, because I don't know if sometimes I have like, let's say a week or something where I need to work by myself because I cannot, especially when you change structures. Like if you just change a method, that's no problem in a team. But if you change structures, if you introduce 3, 4 new classes that have different wirings to each other, sometimes I cannot even explain what I'm doing, but I feel like, this could be the right thing. And if I had I have teams to work with, but sometimes I'm like, hey, guys, leave me alone for a couple of days. I want to play with this, and because I would be insane if I had to define what I'm doing. So I don't know. Maybe it's the perfect mix is to have give people a couple of days if they need it, but they still have to be able to communicate what they want to do or what they did afterwards to the team. So maybe 50-50 or something, because I couldn't communicate 8 hours a day what I'm doing. It's like I don't know, maybe I'm crazy.
Right. So Akira-san, as your experience, how did it go as a teamwork refactoring?
I know the answer.
Smooth?
Yeah. Well, one thing I can say is Git helps.
It helps. It's
Especially the compare view when you compare branches. I
Like
love that.
Subversion. So in Ruby's development, we still use Subversion. I mean Ruby core, Ruby language. So we sometimes have some like difficulties on like doing that such big change.
What's the? I'm just curious. What's the? I remember Subversion being really hard with branches.
Right.
Like you had to copy directories or something. Is
Right,
that still?
right.
Because I haven't worked with Subversion in like 5-6 years, so I don't know. Is it still the same?
I think so.
Okay. Why is it still on Subversion, Ruby?
So in fact, the CRB commit don't use Subversion there. All of the commit use the Git SVN.
Because Ruby has to support Windows, and there's no good Windows client at the moment. For Git, I mean.
Interesting. I didn't know that this problem exists.
So Shibata-san, you were saying you are only working on refactoring. Were you working on a team?
Yes, so I upgraded Rails 2.0 to 4.1. Or it's only work. It's only my work.
It's only yours.
Yeah. So about 2 year long. I refactoring it.
So I guess working alone it's all your call. You are the boss. Cool.
So in my company, I don't see team. I don't see team refactoring. So refactoring is only personal work.
Personal
Yeah.
work. Oh.
You always do it alone, right?
Oh, okay. Cool.
So even if the team works on these refactoring thing, they more vertically divide the task.
Okay.
Like you touch this something.rb and you can touch this something.rb. So it's not gonna conflict.
Oh, right.
So different branches and everything, like
The same branch.
the same branch,
Yeah.
and two people working on two refactorings in the same branch.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
interesting.
first week, some of program refactor the model, and next week some program refactor the view and the controller, and just finish it or merge it.
I guess if the functionality is really separated, then it works.
But that's the problem. Sometimes it's not that easily separatable, and then you cannot only work on the view. You always have to work in the view and the model and the controller, and then so that's why I'm asking if you have two branches for two developers working on two different refactorings, and then you merge the branches and merge the branch into master. But apparently you work on the same branch. That's interesting.
Cool.
Oh, branching is awesome. Branching and Control Shift F in Sublime. That's
It's your refactoring job.
and raise.
Oh, my next question will be: have you ever feel that you have over refactored? Like, what are the signs? And I will think we'll start with Akira-san.
Okay. The question is like over refactored is mean over abstraction maybe.
Oh, I was thinking like, I regret I did this refactoring. It's too much change or or maybe you can talk about your definition. Yeah.
Right. So I'm gonna talk about action view tomorrow, and which is, in my opinion, too much
Abstraction.
abstraction.
Oh, okay.
You can find a def render thing like 28 times in the whole library. Def
Oh.
render.
Render.
The render method
Oh,
appears 28 times in the whole library,
Which is-
The render method.
right,
Yeah.
which is crazy.
My
And each
favorite.
of those has their own different API.
Mhm.
Sometimes options hash, sometimes only the view name, sometimes view name and option,
right,
sometimes
right.
partial and view, and sometimes.
Yes. I've felt that I've refactored sometimes. I've moved code from one method into its own method, but that new method is only ever used in the first method. So why have I split that out into a new method? It's just to give it a fancy name. So my method could have been called something like find client and application, and I've split that out into two methods, find client and find application. And then the first method I call find client and find application. That's when I feel I'm over refactoring, when I'm separating out methods that don't need to be separated, or moving functionality into entire new classes. And that new class is only ever used in one spot. That's no point in refactoring that. You can refactor when you want to clean up the code, when it's actually less code and it's clearer. You don't clean it up because this file is 100 lines and 100 lines is too long. No, it's not right.
I disagree.
100 lines is too long?
99 lines. Yeah, I disagree.
99
I mean,
lines?
I agree that over refactoring usually means over abstraction, as you said, because it means like refactoring always means you introduce new classes or you split up methods into smaller methods. That's refactoring, right? So, but often I take a huge chunk of behavior and put it in a separate class, and even though the class is only used in one place, it's fine. It's got an interface now because the new class has only a limited scope because it's a separate instance. So I clearly see, okay, the dependencies are, I don't know, like the view context and the user object and whatever. So because I have to pass it in the new object that I introduced, and I find this extremely helpful, even though it's used only once. It's just, and it's also I often introduce classes that represent like a domain object in my application or in my gem, and I find this extremely helpful for understanding what I'm doing, because I'm looking at the class and I'm like, okay, template finder, that means it finds a template. Whereas if I have a method somewhere in ActionView find template, you never know, okay, what's the scope, what variables does it use, what's the dependency. So I find introducing classes extremely helpful.
We actually moved out some code in Spree that was in the order model. We moved it out to another class called order contents, and then we could stub in the order contents test a fake order that has an API like a real order. And then we were able to test that when you add an item to the order, these things happen. When you remove an item from the order, these other things happen. So having that abstraction, having that refactor actually helped make the test clearer. We had our order spec over 800 lines of code. And we moved that whole chunk of adding and removing and checking the order contents out to a different class, different set of tests. It made the logic a lot more clearer to read through than having it all just chucked in the same thing as everywhere else.
Sounds good.
Shibata-san, do you?
So, over refactored sign is test break.
break.
Yeah, for me. So, example for I changed one method name and refactored it for me. But our running test is it's an over refactored sign.
So you find the dependencies it's referred to many too many places, and it's hard to do a refactoring. Is that what you mean?
Are you talking about integration test or unit test?
Or unit test.
Okay. I think it's almost time, so we'll take some questions from the audience. So does anyone have any questions? You can raise your hand. Oh, cool.
Hello, I'm Alex. Yeah,
Hello, Alex.
Hello. So a RESTful has a JBuilder and the JSON support API, and also we have on another like a Grab API. The Grab API is also popular, but when you sometimes Grab API, as you don't use, it will become very messy, and you will duplication with the controller. So how do you think how about refactor this part? Because API is become more important than before.
I had this problem recently. I've been building an API using Grape on our major project at work, which is controlling light bulbs with the cloud. And we had an API in Grape, but we wanted to make sure that only the parameters that were being passed through. So we were only permitting some parameters to be passed through. So we wanted the permitted parameters stuff that's been built into Rails 4. So we could just create an action control parameters object and then pass that in and permit the correct parameters. Or we could just use a proper Rails controller instead of using Grape. And that's what I've elected to do. So I've got a proper Rails controller. There's no Grape in my project whatsoever. And instead of JBuilder, I'm using active model serializers, it provides a nicer API, in my opinion, to what JBuilder provides. Yeah.
Actually, my talk tomorrow talks about this kind of stuff, like how do I encapsulate my application domain logic so it can be used it theoretically can be used in different frameworks. Like how do I encapsulate my API logic? So you better be there tomorrow.
Or else.
Because Grab API has several kinds of JBuilder is one choice, JSON is one choice, and also Grab entity and the serializer. You can use the O. So do you think you must have an easy way to do this thing?
I think are you after something like responders in Grape? Maybe where I think what you need is like an object to do your business logic, and then a layer to negotiate between Grape or to do the JSON rendering. Or so I think what would help is decoupling your application logic into a separate object, and then let a third layer interact between Grape and your business logic. It sounds a bit like this.
It sounds like what active model serializers provides.
Active model serializers only serialize, but what if you want to deserialize stuff? Ryan.
Well, Nick,
Yes.
you could JSON parse it and then write some...
Hey, are you David Heinemeier or what?
well, look at this. I mean...
Because I was talking with DHH about exactly this a couple of days ago, and then he said he usually does the parsing code in a what did he say, like himself. So which basically means JSON parse, and then you deserialize objects.
Right.
And
But typically when I'm writing an API, I'm not going to ever consume a third party's API.
What if you want to consume a post request to create a new order or something? That's
So
consuming.
create a new order in a different system?
No, your API is it read only or is it read and write? Because
It's read and write, yes.
Okay, so how do you consume like a post request for creating a new article?
Okay, so you get post to articles.json, you post a list of your articles, and then you go to the model and you say create.
Yeah, but what if there's more logic involved? Not only what if article.create doesn't do all the stuff you need?
Wait, I think you're trying to trap me.
Yeah, totally. So basically, to come back, I think the solution is introducing an abstraction layer for your business logic and then hooking that to Grape. But I'm not sure how. I know about Grape. There's a binding for using ROAR, which does exactly what I was talking about. Like
That's one of Nick's gems.
and and this so you basically run your business logic, pass the object to RAW, and RAW does the rendering and parsing, by the way.
Oh, wow. So much.
Single responsibility. Is that? Are we avoiding your question, or does it help?
Yeah, it helps.
Now you're even more confused, like active model serializer, raw. Yeah.
Cool.
But I agree that Rails lacks something like JSON deserializer, because we have strong parameters in Rails 4, but it only
It's only cosmetics.
no, I mean it checks only the posted params, not the JSON body.
Exactly. So I'm talking about this tomorrow. Exactly this. Like
Rails actually
Alright,
has
alright.
a params parser for JSON built in, I thought.
yeah, but Rails just has this global params parser as a rec middleware. And
Yes.
what if you want to customize your deserialization? What if I want to parse? What if I don't want to use the generic JSON parser, which just gives me a hash? What if I want to parse JSON into objects, into an object graph?
Yes.
That's totally lacking in Rails, and this is why
Yes.
DHH he does it himself. But I find it wrong because you're spreading your document knowledge to rendering because you have the JBuilder or whatever, and then you have the parsing code, which is kind of redundant. And this is what you're saying. Like there's a missing ingredient, which we're gonna learn about tomorrow.
Thank you. You answered my question.
Cool. And does anyone have any other questions?
How did we end up talking about a
Please.
What are the signs you look for when deciding when to refactor and how much to refactor?
When my eyes start bleeding.
eye drops can help?
I know, but when I'm trying to look through, so Spree's old promotion code was extremely complex, and promotions are just in general. It's actually, the reason why they're complex in general is because the stores don't want you to compare to other stores about their promotion logic. So you get 10% off at this store when you spend $50, but only on Tuesdays, and you get like 20% off at this store, but it's only for these items. The promotion logic is extremely complex. So on Spree, we mirrored it. It was also complex inside of Spree. I decided to refactor it when one day I was trying to jump through it, and I just saw all these this method called update called everywhere. I'm like, what does this update method do? Okay, you update the adjustment, it updates the order, and then once the order has been updated, it updates the payments and the shipments, and you're like, I don't understand how this is working. So I wanted to refactor it so I could make it clear to anyone else who would come along after me and say, it goes from here to here to here. That's it. And any parts along that way after the refactoring, if it still wasn't clear, I would leave a comment. So I'd say, this is why this method exists. This is what this method does. And then I think that leaves a good signpost. So if you look at Spree's adjustment code now, it should be a lot more simpler. Check out to like 1.3 and compare 1.3 to today. It should be a lot more simpler.
Sorry, because it's almost time and don't want to keep anyone from not having the snacks. So
Snacks?
Just the very last question. One sentence, each one of you. Like, do you recommend any resource book, blog post about refactoring? No.
Martin Fowler refactoring the book.
That's the answer.
Tick.
I like Sandy Metz's book, Principles of Object-Oriented Design in Ruby.
Oh, okay.
Poodr. Yeah, good book.
Cool. And
Aaron Patterson's commits.
commits. Okay. And Shibata-san?
His own commits.
So our code climate blog. Code climate.
Code
Climate in a company.
Oh, okay.
Their blog is good resources for model refactoring.
Cool. I guess we will put this on the Twitter later. And then thanks, and it's time. And thanks for Ryan, Nick, Shibata-san, and Akira-san to come. And yeah, it's snack time. Thanks.
Thanks for having us.